Millionaire agreed to an arranged marriage, thinking she was ordinary until one secret changed everything. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled Millionaire Agreed to an Arranged Marriage, thinking she was ordinary until one secret changed everything. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain drifted down the wide glass windows of Cole Tower, tracing silver lines over the reflection of a man who had everything except choice. Ethan Cole, 32, CEO of Cole Enterprises, stood silent as the city below pulsed with life. The skylines shimmered, but his world had never felt so small. On his desk, a single envelope waited, embossed with his family crest. Inside was a demand written by his father, the chairman of the empire he had built. "If you are not married by the end of the quarter," the letter said, "your shares and voting rights will transfer to your cousin. The board needs stability, not bachelor scandals." Ethan set the paper down, his jaw tightening. For years, he had run the company flawlessly, but his father's generation still measured success by appearances, not integrity. Marriage, to them, was a contract no different from a merger. That night, in the glittering ballroom of the Brooks Hotel, he attended a corporate gala he had no interest in. Gold chandeliers glowed overhead. Every conversation sounded rehearsed. Cameras flashed. Then, through the sea of suits and sequins, he saw her. She stood near the back, calm yet out of place, wearing a pale blue dress that caught the light like morning water. Lila Hart. He remembered the name from the guest list, a daughter of a once-renowned art collector whose gallery was now drowning in debt. She was talking to an older man with a voice full of authority, her father. When their eyes met, something flickered. Not recognition, not attraction, something quieter, like two people who had both learned to stand alone in rooms filled with noise. Later, his father found him. "She will do," his father said simply. "Her family situation makes her practical. You both need this arrangement." Ethan gave a humorless smile. "So this is how my life is negotiated now. A merger by marriage." His father's reply was as sharp as the clink of glass. "You are a businessman, Ethan. Think of it as another deal to protect your empire." And remembered Paula waited. The next evening, in a private dining room lined with marble, Lila sat across from Ethan. She was composed, but her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her teacup. Between them lay a folder of legal documents, their contract. "You do not know me," she said softly, "and I do not belong in your world. Why force this?" Ethan's expression barely shifted. "Because it solves both our problems. You keep your gallery. I keep my company." Her laugh was quiet, bitter. "So this is business, not marriage." "Exactly," he said. 6 months. Public appearances, formal events, no emotional complications. When the term ends, we walk away. This instant, she looked down at the papers, her reflection bending over the ink. "And if I say no, then your father loses everything," Ethan said gently, without malice. "And you know he cannot afford that." The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm outside. Lila stared at the pen, then signed her name. Her signature was small but unshaken. Ethan reached into his jacket and opened a small black velvet box. Inside was a silver ring, plain, elegant, untouched by diamonds. "A symbol," he said quietly, "for the public, not for us." Lila took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. "It feels heavier than I thought it would." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Everything that looks simple usually is not. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. Two strangers sat in the soft glow of the chandelier, tied together by ink and obligation. Neither of them knew that this was not just a contract, it was the beginning of something neither could control. By morning, the headlines blazed. "Cole Hair marries in secret ceremony to save family legacy." But behind the perfect photos, the smiles, and the signatures, one truth waited to be uncovered, one secret that would change everything. And now, let us return to our main character. The morning after the contract was signed, Lila woke to the faint hum of city traffic and the rustle of curtains drawn by a housekeeper she had never met. The guest room in Ethan's penthouse overlooked the Hudson River, all glass and quiet power. It felt more like a museum than a home. On the marble nightstand sat a single note written in neat handwriting, Breakfast at 8. The driver will take you to the Cole Foundation for registration. E. C. She folded the note carefully and placed it back down. The silence was heavy, almost watchful. Every part of her life now came with someone else's instructions. Downstairs, Ethan was already dressed in a charcoal suit, sipping black coffee beside the panoramic window. His posture was straight, his expression unreadable. When she appeared, his eyes lifted from his tablet just briefly. "Good morning," he said. "Morning," she answered, forcing calm into her voice. They sat opposite each other at a long dining table that could seat 12. The distance between them felt longer than the table itself. "You do not have to attend every public event," Ethan said, setting his tablet aside. "But there are certain appearances we cannot avoid. The charity gala this weekend, for example." Lila looked up. "The same people who already think this is a publicity stunt?" His mouth curved slightly. "Then we give them a show worth believing." Her tone cooled. "You really think life is just about performance, do you?" Ethan's gaze lingered on her. "No, I think it is about control." The words hung in the air like glass. Lila said nothing, but inside something pressed hard against her chest. Later that afternoon, a stylist team arrived: hair, wardrobe, posture coach. They moved through the penthouse like quiet professionals, measuring, pinning, instructing. Lila let them work, though her reflection in the mirror no longer looked like her. The dress fit perfectly, the heels added elegance, but the woman in the glass looked like a stranger rehearsing how to breathe. That evening, the car glided up to the Cole Tower entrance, cameras already flashing. Ethan stepped out first, hand extended. Lila hesitated before placing her fingers in his. The air outside was cold enough to make her shiver. "Smile," he murmured under his breath. "They can smell fear." "You are unbelievable," she whispered back, lips still curved in a perfect smile. Inside the ballroom, champagne sparkled under crystal lights. The elite of New York moved in soft murmurs, pretending to care about charity while studying every diamond and handshake. Ethan introduced her to the board, to partners, to the press. His voice was steady, practiced. "My wife, Lila," he said. The words rolled off his tongue easily, but something in his tone carried weight she could not name. When a journalist leaned in with a sharp question, "Mrs. Cole, do you think marrying into power changes who you are?" Lila paused. She could feel every lens waiting for her reaction. "Power does not change people," she said calmly. "It only shows who they really were." A ripple of surprise spread through the crowd. Even Ethan's brow lifted slightly. He glanced at her with something that looked almost like respect. Hours later, when the event ended and the penthouse lights dimmed, Lila slipped off her shoes and stared out at the river again. The city glittered below, endless and indifferent. Behind her, Ethan's voice broke the silence. "You handled that well tonight." She turned slightly. "You sound surprised." "I am not," he said. "I am just realizing this arrangement might be more complicated than I thought." Lila met his eyes in the reflection. "Then you should have written better terms, Mr. Cole." He almost smiled, then turned away. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Lila exhaled slowly. She did not know it yet, but that moment, the look in his eyes, the spark of challenge, was the first crack in the wall between them. The next morning, the sky was clear for the first time in days. Sunlight poured across the glass walls of the penthouse, catching the faint shimmer of the silver ring on Lila's hand. She turned it slowly between her fingers, still uncertain whether it felt like protection or a chain. A soft knock on the door pulled her out of thought. Ethan's assistant, Claire, stood in the doorway holding a folder. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole. Mr. Cole asked me to review a few guidelines for the next 6 months." Lila blinked. "Guidelines?" Claire nodded, polite but distant. "Just the conditions of the contract. Nothing personal, purely professional." She handed the folder over. Inside were 5 typed rules. 1. Appear together at designated events. 2. No interference in personal business affairs. 3. Maintain discretion with the media. 4. No emotional involvement. 5. 6 months only. Lila's fingers tightened around the paper. Rule number 4 looked like it was underlined in invisible ink. When she came downstairs, Ethan was in the study, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by files and glowing screens. He looked up as she entered. "Claire gave you the guidelines?" he asked. "I did," she said quietly. "It feels less like marriage and more like a company policy. And made it only undone." "It is what it needs to be," he replied. "And if someone breaks a rule?" Ethan's eyes met hers. Then we handle it like adults without emotion. She laughed softly. That might be easy for you. He looked at her for a long moment, and something unreadable passed between them. Later that afternoon, she wandered through the Cole Foundation offices, where she had been assigned a symbolic position art consultant for community outreach. It was mostly a gesture for the press, but the work itself mattered to her. Paintings donated by small artists lined the walls. A group of interns greeted her shyly, unaware she was part of a corporate marriage deal. Lila knelt beside a young artist struggling with his first exhibition layout. Art is not about being perfect, she said gently. It is about being honest. Ethan arrived quietly behind her, watching as she adjusted a frame. You know, for someone who claims she does not belong here, he said, you fit in surprisingly well. She turned, startled. I thought you did not believe in things that could not be measured. I do when I see results, he said. Their eyes met. For a moment, the room fell silent, except for the faint hum of air conditioning. Something unfamiliar stirred between them, curiosity, maybe even warmth, but neither dared name it. That evening, over dinner, the distance between them felt thinner. Lila asked, do you ever regret anything, Ethan? He hesitated, setting down his fork. Regret implies you had a choice. Maybe you did, she said softly. You just did not take it. His gaze held hers across the candlelight. And what about you, Lila? Did you take yours? She smiled faintly. I took a contract. The corner of his mouth lifted. Touché. Outside, the city glowed like a field of stars turned upside down. Lila excused herself and stepped onto the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. She could hear faint music from somewhere below, laughter echoing off the street. For the first time, she wondered if this arrangement could ever feel real, or if pretending too long might make her forget where the act ended. Inside, Ethan watched her through the glass. He could tell she was not like anyone he had known. And for the first time in years, he felt something he could not manage with a contract. He turned away before she could notice. Neither of them said it out loud, but the rules had already begun to break. The following week moved like a blur of headlines, handshakes, and rehearsed smiles. Ethan's world ran on calendars and contracts, while Lila's ran on instinct and quiet rebellion. Yet somehow, their worlds kept colliding. It began on a Tuesday morning when Ethan announced, without looking up from his tablet, we need to prepare for the Cole Foundation's annual charity gala. The board will expect both of us there. Lila looked up from her coffee. Another performance? Call it strategy, he said. Every marriage needs an audience, especially one that is temporary. Her reply was sharp but calm. And every audience eventually sees the cracks. Ethan's expression did not change, but something in his voice softened. Then let us make sure they look in the wrong direction. 2 days later, the transformation began. The penthouse turned into a whirlwind of fabric, heels, and stylists. Lila stood in front of the mirror as the tailor adjusted a sleek silver gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her reflection no longer looked like the struggling artist who had signed a desperate contract. She looked like someone who belonged to his world. When Ethan entered the room, even he paused. His usual composure faltered for a fraction of a second. You clean up well, he said. And you rehearse your compliments, she replied, though a smile tugged at her lips. Saturday night arrived, and the gala unfolded inside the Grand Astoria Hotel, an ocean of gowns, champagne, and soft orchestral music. Photographers lined the entrance. Ethan stepped out of the black car first, then turned and offered his hand. Lila hesitated for a heartbeat before placing hers in his. Flashbulbs erupted as they walked in together. To the public, they looked perfect, calm, united, untouchable. But inside, Lila's pulse raced with the rhythm of every whispered question. A journalist leaned forward. Mrs. Cole, what is it like being married to one of New York's most powerful men? Lila met the woman's eyes, steady and unflinching. Power is not about wealth, she said softly. It is about how you treat people when no one is watching. The response caught the room off guard. Ethan's hand at her back tightened slightly, pride flickering behind his controlled expression. Later, when the speeches ended, Ethan guided her toward the balcony overlooking the glittering city. For the first time, there was no press, no noise, just them and the sound of rain starting to fall. You surprised them, he said. You surprised me. She looked out at the skyline. Do you always expect the worst from people? It saves disappointment. Maybe, she said quietly, but it also kills hope. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. He studied her face, lit by the reflection of lightning far beyond the glass. You really believe in hope? I believe in honesty, she said, even when it costs you. Their eyes met, and something in his chest shifted, a feeling he could not quantify, could not control. It was not part of the plan, not in the contract. As the first drops of rain streaked down the glass, he reached out and brushed a stray curl from her cheek. She did not move away. The air between them trembled, alive with everything unspoken. Then, just as quickly, he stepped back, straightening his tie. We should go. The board will want to see us leave together. Lila nodded, masking the flutter in her chest. Of course, Mr. Cole. But when he offered his arm again, she slipped her hand through without hesitation. The cameras flashed once more as they walked through the grand doors. The picture-perfect couple. What the cameras did not capture was the truth that somewhere between the scripted smiles and staged affection, a real story had begun to form. Neither of them knew it yet, but the lines of their contract were already blurring into something neither could rewrite. The morning after the gala, the news headlines exploded across every business outlet. Ethan Cole and his mysterious wife captivate New York's elite. Every photograph captured their perfect smiles. Every caption whispered about their chemistry. But behind the polished images, reality felt far less perfect. Lila sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through her phone, watching strangers dissect her life online. Gold digger. Smart move. She played it well. The words blurred together until she set the phone down. Ethan entered, reading the same stories on his tablet. Do not let it bother you, he said without looking up. Public opinion changes faster than the weather. It still hurts, she said quietly. I did not marry you for this. His voice was cool, almost automatic. No, you married me for a contract. The words landed sharper than he intended. Silence filled the room. Lila rose, holding her coffee cup tightly. And you think that excuses everything? He finally looked at her. There was something in his eyes, tiredness, maybe regret, but he said nothing more. That afternoon, Lila visited the foundation office again. The small art program she had started was gaining attention. A group of local students waited for her, excited to show their work. For the first time in days, she smiled. When she returned home that evening, she found Ethan in his study, surrounded by stacks of reports. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment the businessman disappeared. You stayed late, he said. The kids needed help setting up their exhibit, she replied. It is good for them. He nodded slowly. You have a way of turning obligations into purpose. She smiled faintly. And you have a way of turning people into obligations. His lips curved into something, almost like a smile. Touché again. Their banter eased the tension, but under the surface, something warmer had begun to stir. For the first time, Ethan asked about her art, what inspired her, what she used to paint before all of this. She told him about color, light, and the silence between brushstrokes. He listened, really listened, and that alone surprised her. Later that night, as the city slept beneath a soft drizzle, Ethan found himself standing outside her art room. The door was half open, and inside, Lila was painting. The room smelled of turpentine and rain. She wore one of his old shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows, completely lost in the moment. He leaned against the doorway and said softly, You know, you never told me what you are painting. She turned, startled but smiling. It is not finished. Neither are most good things, he said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the world felt still. He stepped closer, drawn by something he could not name. But before he could speak, her phone buzzed. She glanced down and her expression changed. The message on the screen glowed cold and sharp. You do not belong in his world. Leave before he finds out the truth. Her fingers trembled as she locked the screen. Ethan frowned. Is something wrong? Lila forced a smile. Nothing important, but he noticed the hesitation, the shadow that flickered across her eyes. When she turned back to the canvas, Ethan lingered in the doorway for another moment, studying her silhouette in the golden light. Something about her felt fragile yet unbreakable, a mystery wrapped in calm. He walked away, but his thoughts did not. For the first time, the man who built his empire on control realized he was losing control completely, not of his company, but of his heart. And neither of them could see what was coming next. The message on Lila's phone stayed in her mind long after she deleted it. No name, no number, just a warning that felt too specific to ignore. Every word echoed in her thoughts, leave before he finds out the truth. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed something had shifted. Lila smiled less, spoke softly, and spent more time alone in her art room. When he asked if something was wrong, she always said, "I am just tired." But Ethan knew tiredness was not what haunted her eyes. One night, as rain pattered against the glass walls of the penthouse, Ethan found her sitting by the balcony with a sketchbook open on her lap. The pages were covered in charcoal drawings, faces, fragments, memories. He stepped closer. "You have not painted in 2 days," he said gently. She looked up, startled. "You keep count now?" "I notice what matters," he said. Her expression softened for a moment, but she quickly turned away. "Not everything that matters can stay." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" "Nothing," she whispered. "Forget I said it." He reached out, almost touching her shoulder, then stopped. "If someone is threatening you, I need to know." She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat it looked like she might tell him. But then she shook her head. "This is not your problem." The words stung more than he expected. "Lila, you are my wife. Contract or not, you are my responsibility." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. "That is the problem, Ethan. You think everything is a responsibility, not a connection." For once, he had no answer. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ethan went to his private study. He stared at the city glowing below and felt the weight of something unfamiliar, helplessness. He could face business rivals, boardroom fights, or corporate threats, but he did not know how to fight whatever it was that frightened her. The next morning, he received a call from his cousin Nathan, a man known for charm that always hit a sharper edge. "I saw the headlines," Nathan said smoothly. "You and your lovely wife make quite the story." Ethan's tone was flat. "Get to the point. And they sings to us lo klong so was the absolute great and in setting Safand. I just wonder if you really know who she is. Her family name is not exactly what it seems. Might be worth looking into before the board does." Ethan ended the call, jaw tight. He had no proof Nathan meant harm, but something about the warning sounded too similar to the one Lila had received. That evening, when Lila came home, he watched her quietly as she hung her coat and walked past him. There was an unspoken wall between them, now built of secrets neither dared to touch. But when she paused by the window, her reflection in the glass caught the city lights like fire. He saw the same woman who had stood beside him at the gala, strong and graceful, but now shadowed by fear. He stepped closer. "Whatever it is, you do not have to face it alone," he said softly. She turned, eyes shining. "You say that now, Ethan, but when you find out what I am hiding, you will wish you never met me." He wanted to demand the truth, but her voice broke, and he stopped himself. Instead, he whispered, "Then give me the chance to prove you wrong." The silence that followed was not empty, it was heavy with everything they were both afraid to feel. Outside, thunder rolled again, just like the night they signed the contract. But this time, something had changed. For the first time, Ethan was no longer thinking about protecting his company. He was thinking about protecting her. 2 days later, the storm that had been building finally broke. Only this time, it was not the weather. It was the truth. Ethan had been in a board meeting when his phone buzzed with an alert. A breaking news headline flashed across the screen. "Cole marriage scandal, anonymous source claims Mrs. Lila Cole lied about her identity." Every head in the room turned toward him. His cousin Nathan sat at the far end of the table, a faint smile curving his lips. Ethan's hand tightened around his phone until his knuckles went white. He stood abruptly. Meeting adjourned. Within minutes, he was in his car, the city rushing past in a blur of gray and rain. His mind replayed every warning, every word she had tried to say but could not. By the time he reached the penthouse, photographers were already outside the gate. Flashes of light followed him through the storm. Inside, Lila stood frozen in front of the television. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy with disbelief. On screen, a reporter spoke quickly over a slideshow of old photos. Lila, as a teenager, standing beside a woman labeled Lila Hart, convicted art dealer. The words sliced through the air like glass. Ethan's voice was low but sharp. "You are going to tell me this is not true." Her lips parted, but no sound came. "Lila," he pressed. "Who is she?" She swallowed hard. "She was my mother." The silence that followed was deafening. "You lied to me," he said. "To everyone." "I did not lie," she whispered. "I just never told you. I changed my name after she was arrested. I was 17. I wanted to start over." He stared at her, anger and confusion warring behind his eyes. "And you thought marrying into my family was a good way to start over?" Tears filled her eyes. "You think I wanted this? I did it to save my father's gallery, Your father's company was going to buy it out and shut it down. I agreed to the marriage because it was the only way to keep it alive. Ethan took a step back, as if her words physically hit him. So this was a lie from the beginning. It's not of Glain Sable de Depp Pinnery Poneted, Inflormson in her Pinnery tutors. No, she said, shaking her head. It was a mistake that turned into something real, but Ethan had already turned away. The board will see this as a scandal. Nathan will use it to destroy me. Do you have any idea what you have done? Lila's voice cracked. All I ever did was try to protect what was left of my family. You of all people should understand that. He looked at her for a long moment, rain dripping from his coat, eyes unreadable. The difference is, I never lied to get it. She flinched as if struck. He started toward the door. Where are you going? She called after him. To fix the mess, he said, like I always do. And ward time, die, in time, doin' every one. The door slammed, leaving her alone in the echo of his absence. That night, the city drowned in rain. Lila sat by the window, clutching the ring she had once worn proudly. The silver band felt cold against her skin. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger again, one who had lost everything she had fought for. She whispered to the empty room, I told the truth too late. Across the city, Ethan stood in his office, watching the lights blur through the storm. He wanted to be angry, but all he felt was a hollow ache. Somewhere deep down, he knew she had not married him for power. She had married him because she had no choice. And yet, the damage was done. The contract that had started it all was now nothing but paper, and their fragile trust had been washed away in the rain. The next morning, New York woke up to scandal. Every major network replayed the same story. Lila's hidden past, the family name she had buried, and the accusation that she had married Ethan Cole for power. Paparazzi crowded outside the Cole Tower, their cameras flashing like lightning every time the elevator doors opened. Inside, Lila stood in the hallway with her suitcase by her feet. She had been packing all night. The apartment was too quiet now, stripped of the small warmth that had slowly begun to grow between them. When Ethan stepped out of the elevator, he stopped cold at the sight of her bags. His voice was low, heavy with exhaustion. You are leaving. She nodded once. There is nothing left for me to stay for. The board will never forgive me, and your cousin will not stop until he takes everything from you. I will not let my name drag you down. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the marble floor. Do you think running away fixes anything? It fixes you, she said softly. It protects what you built. He looked at her, anger mixing with something deeper. I did not build this alone anymore, Lila. She blinked, caught off guard. What are you saying? There's ling my soul way. I am saying I am not letting Nathan or the press define the truth. You think you deceived me, but the only lie here is theirs. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Nathan, an invitation to an emergency board meeting that afternoon. The subject line was simple. Vote of no confidence. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. He is making his move. Then let me go, Lila pleaded. If I stay, he wins. But Ethan shook his head. If you leave, he wins faster. Hours later, the boardroom filled with men in tailored suits, their faces tight with anticipation. Nathan sat near the head of the table, his smirk thin and sharp. Cameras were rolling for the official record. Ethan entered, calm but cold. Lila followed a step behind, her chin lifted despite the whispers. Nathan wasted no time. The reputation of Cole Enterprises has been compromised. The public sees us as a scandal-ridden empire. I moved to remove Ethan Cole as CEO. Ethan stood, his voice steady. Before you vote, you should know one thing. My wife is not a con artist. She is the founder of the Hart Initiative, the largest independent art charity in the state, a charity she built quietly for 10 years under a different name. The room stirred with murmurs. Nathan's smug expression faltered. Ethan continued. She hid her past because the world judged her for her mother's crimes, not her own. I would have done the same. He turned toward Lila. The only mistake she made was believing this family would not understand redemption. Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she stood still, letting his words carry across the room. Ethan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Here are the financial reports. Every cent donated through the Hart Initiative has gone to community programs, including the one that kept this company's own foundation alive during the recession. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, one of the older board members spoke. If that is true, then this woman's reputation should not be the issue here. The issue is who tried to destroy her. Is remaster G's mans with a audacity have ris. Nathan's confidence cracked. You cannot prove, but Ethan's voice cut him off. The anonymous leak came from your private account. The legal department confirmed it an hour ago. Gasps filled the room. Nathan's face turned pale. Ethan looked around the table. Gentlemen, if anyone still doubts my ability to lead, now is the time to vote. No one spoke. One by one, the board members lowered their eyes. When the meeting ended, Lila stood at the doorway, her breath trembling. Ethan turned to her, his voice quieter now. You should have told me sooner. She nodded. I wanted to, but I was afraid. He took a step closer. I was afraid too. It is wrong go. Outside, the cameras were still waiting, but this time, when they walked out together, they did not look like a contract couple pretending for the flash. They looked like two people who had just fought for something real. And for the first time since their marriage began, neither of them felt the need to act. A week later, the storm had finally quieted. The news cycle had shifted to other scandals, and the frenzy around their marriage faded into background noise. Cole Enterprises had survived, stronger than before, and Nathan had quietly resigned, disappearing from the headlines entirely. But the quiet between Ethan and Lila was different. It was not distance anymore. It was peace. On a gray morning, sunlight spilled into the art studio at the Cole Foundation. Canvases lined the walls, filled with color again. Lila stood before a nearly finished painting, her brush moving slowly, steady and sure. Ethan entered without a sound, holding 2 cups of coffee. You never take a break, he said. She smiled over her shoulder. Says the man who built an empire and calls it a hobby. He chuckled softly and handed her the cup. So, what is this one called? Lila looked at the painting, 2 figures standing under a rainstorm, holding a single umbrella. It is called Second Chances. He studied it quietly, his eyes tracing every brushstroke. You always find a way to turn pain into something beautiful. That is what artists do, she said, and maybe what survivors do too. Ethan set his coffee down and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, their old marriage contract. The ink was faded, the edges worn. You remember this? He asked. Lila frowned softly. How could I forget? He unfolded it slowly and placed it on the table between them. I kept thinking about the rules we wrote, especially the last one, 6 months only. Her heart caught in her throat. The contract is almost over, she whispered. He nodded, then picked up a pen. I think we need a new one. The speeded or reasoned time. Her eyes widened as he drew a line through the old text and wrote something new beneath it. Then he handed her the paper. She read the single sentence written in his careful handwriting. Clause 1. Love without limitation or expiration. Lila looked up at him, speechless. Ethan smiled faintly. If you will have me, this time it will not be business. It will be everything else. Her hands trembled as she reached for the paper, then for his hand. You are serious? I have never been more serious in my life, he said softly. You taught me that control does not make a man strong. Honesty does. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, Then I accept. It is lone statter, I may say. He took the simple silver ring from her finger, the same one that had once symbolized a contract, and slid it back on. Now it finally means something real. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle and familiar. Ethan stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Do you ever think about that night? The rain, the contract, the strangers who said yes for all the wrong reasons? Lila nodded. I do. And I think those strangers had to make every wrong choice to find the right one. He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. Then maybe fate is not so cruel after all. The camera of the world no longer followed them. There were no headlines, no contracts, no lies left to untangle. Only 2 people standing in the quiet, beginning again. As the rain tapped gently against the windows, Lila turned to him and said softly, Looks like we finally rewrote our story. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, whispering back, No, Lila, we just started it. And behind them, the painting of 2 figures under one umbrella gleamed in the morning light, signed at the corner with her name, but titled by his hand, Ordinary No More.